cheating wife laughed while signaling the divorce papers until the judge read his net worth. "I'm going to destroy you in court, Ethan. Half of everything you've built will be mine by Christmas." Those were the last words Vanessa Cole whispered to her husband before winking at her divorce attorney and signing those papers with a smile that could cut glass. She had no idea that the man sitting across from her had already orchestrated the most brilliant financial chess move in divorce court history. What happened next will make you question everything you think you know about marriage, money, and revenge. Viewers, have you ever trusted someone so completely that their betrayal felt like a physical blow to your chest? How do you handle it? Drop your thoughts in the comments. The rain hammered against the floor-tipped ceiling windows of the downtown Seattle law office. Ethan Cole sat perfectly still in the leather chair, his steel-gray eyes fixed on the mahogany conference table. At 42, he had built a tech empire from nothing, turning lines of code into hundreds of millions of dollars. But today, he looked like just another man about to lose everything. Vanessa Cole swept into the room like she owned it, her designer heels clicking with confidence. At 35, she was stunning, honey blonde-haired, pulled back in a sleek chignon, wearing a black Armani suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent. She looked like success, like power, like someone about to get exactly what she wanted. "Sorry I'm late," she said, not sounding sorry at all. She didn't even glance at Ethan, instead focusing on her phone with the attention she used to reserve for him during their first year of marriage. Tyler Grant, her divorce attorney, slid into the chair beside her with the hungry expression of a shark smelling blood. Young, ambitious, with a reputation for destroying wealthy husbands in divorce court. "Mrs. Cole, based on preliminary financial disclosures, we're looking at a marital estate worth approximately $850 million. Washington state law entitles you to a significant portion." Vanessa's lips curved into a smile that would make the devil uncomfortable. "I've been ready for months, Tyler. The question is whether my soon-to-be ex-husband is prepared to pay for thinking he could ignore me for 5 years. Ethan's lawyer, Margaret Chen, was a silver-haired woman with 30 years of courtroom warfare experience. As she sat beside Ethan, reviewing her notes, something in her expression seemed almost amused. "Mr. Cole, are you absolutely certain about this approach? Once we proceed, there's no going back." Ethan nodded once, his face revealing nothing. "I'm certain, Margaret. Let's get this over with." But what Vanessa didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know, was that 3 months earlier, Ethan had discovered something that changed everything, something that had turned his loving husband into a man capable of the most sophisticated revenge she could never imagine, something that would make her regret every lie, every secret meeting, every moment she'd spent planning his destruction while he was building hers. The game was already over. She just didn't know it yet. 3 months earlier, Ethan Cole had been working late in his home office when he heard Vanessa's laughter drifting up from the kitchen. It was a sound he hadn't heard in months, genuine, musical, the kind of laughter that had first made him fall in love with her. Curious, he'd quietly made his way downstairs, thinking maybe she was watching something funny on her phone. Instead, he found her pressed against the kitchen counter, her arms wrapped around a man he didn't recognize. Young, athletic, with a kind of easy confidence that Ethan had never possessed. They were kissing with the desperate hunger of people who had been waiting all day for this moment. "I can't wait much longer, Marcus," Vanessa was whispering against the stranger's lips. "The divorce papers are almost ready. By Christmas, I'll be free and rich, and we can go anywhere we want." And Marcus, her personal trainer, Ethan realized with a stab of pain that was almost physical, ran his hands through her hair. "Are you sure he doesn't suspect anything? The guy's pretty smart." And Vanessa laughed again, but this time it was cold, calculating, smart. Ethan's brilliant with computers, but completely clueless about people. "He's been so buried in his work for the past 2 years that he barely notices I exist. Trust me, he has no idea." Ethan had stood there in the shadows, watching his wife plan his destruction with another man in their kitchen, feeling something die inside him. Not just his marriage, that had been dead for months if he was honest with himself, but his faith in people, his ability to trust, his belief that the woman he loved for 15 years had at least some small part of her that still cared about him. He'd been wrong. "How much do you think you'll get?" Marcus asked, his hands roaming places that used to belong to Ethan. "Tyler says at least $400 million, maybe more." Around 20 years of marriage, Ethan had accumulated a fortune estimated at over $300 million. His computer software company alone was worth that. Even with the prenup, Washington state law is pretty favorable to wives, especially when the husband has been emotionally neglectful. She kissed Marcus again, deeper this time. "We'll have enough to buy that villa in Tuscany you showed me, enough to travel the world, enough to never worry about money again." That night, after Marcus had left and Vanessa had gone to bed humming like she just won the lottery, Ethan had sat in his office staring at his computer screen, not a code or financial reports or the endless stream of emails that usually consumed his attention, but a single document, his will.
Everything he owned, everything he'd built, everything that represented 20 years of 18-hour days and sacrificed weekends and missed dinners, it was all going to go to a woman who was counting the days until she could take half of it and run away with her personal trainer, unless he did something about it. The next morning, Ethan had called his mother. Linda Cole was 68, sharp as a tack, and had never particularly liked Vanessa. She'd always been too polite to say so directly, but Ethan had seen it in her eyes during family gatherings. The way she watched his wife with the careful attention of someone who didn't quite trust what they were seeing. "I need your help, Mom," he said, and he told her everything. Linda Cole had been quiet for a long moment after Ethan finished telling her about the kitchen scene, about Marcus, about Vanessa's plan to take half of everything he'd built. Then she'd said, "What do you need me to do?" And Ethan had smiled for the first time in months. "I need you to become the richest woman in Seattle." Over the next 6 weeks, Ethan and his mother had orchestrated the most sophisticated legal maneuver in divorce court history. Every asset, every investment, every piece of property that Ethan Cole had accumulated over 20 years of building his tech empire was quietly, legally, and completely transferred to Linda Cole's name. The house in Bellevue worth $12 million. Now, it belonged to Linda, with Ethan listed as a caretaker with signing privileges. The vacation home in Aspen, Linda's property, with Ethan as the designated manager. The tech company stocks worth hundreds of millions, all transferred to a trust with Linda as the sole beneficiary and Ethan as the trustee. The beauty of it, Margaret Chen had explained during one of their secret planning sessions, is that everything is completely legal. Asset transfers between family members are perfectly legitimate. The timing might seem suspicious, but proving fraudulent intent would be nearly impossible, especially since the assets are genuinely out of your name. Linda had thrown herself into the role with the enthusiasm of someone who had been waiting her whole life for the chance to outmaneuver someone she'd never trusted. "I've been watching that woman for years," she told Ethan. "The way she looks at your success like it's something she's entitled to. The way she treats you like you're boring because you're not flashy enough for her. I've been waiting for her to show her true colors." The prenuptial agreement had been the key to everything. Ethan's lawyers had been thorough when they drafted it 15 years earlier, including a clause that waived all spousal support in cases of marital infidelity. At the time, Vanessa had signed it without reading it carefully, too swept up in wedding planning to worry about what would happen if their marriage failed. "She's going to walk into that courtroom expecting to become one of the richest women in America," Ethan had told his mother. "Instead, she's going to discover that she's entitled to exactly nothing." But the most brilliant part of the plan wasn't just the asset transfer. It was the timing. Ethan had waited until Vanessa filed for divorce first, letting her think she was in control, letting her believe she was the one orchestrating his downfall. Her lawyer had prepared their case based on financial disclosures that were technically accurate at the time they were filed, but had become worthless the moment Ethan's mother signed the final transfer documents. "The look on her face is going to be priceless," Linda had said, and Ethan had realized that his mother was enjoying this almost as much as he was. Because this wasn't just about money. This was about justice. This was about making sure that someone who had betrayed trust, who had planned destruction, who had celebrated the idea of taking half of everything earned through decades of hard work, got exactly what they deserved. Nothing. The courtroom was smaller than expected, with dark wood paneling and portraits of stern-faced judges watching from the walls. Judge Carter was a woman in her 60s with silver hair and the kind of presence that commanded immediate respect. She had been presiding over divorce cases for over 20 years, and she had seen every trick, every lie, every desperate attempt to hide assets. "Good afternoon," she said as they took their seats. "I understand we have a fairly straightforward asset division case today. Mrs. Cole, you're seeking dissolution of marriage and equitable distribution of marital assets."
Her voice steady despite the growing knot in her stomach. "Yes, Your Honor, my husband and I have been married for 15 years, and during that time he has accumulated significant wealth through his technology companies. I believe I'm entitled to my fair share of the marital estate." Judge Carter nodded and turned to Ethan. "Mr. Cole, do you contest your wife's claims regarding the marital assets?" Ethan rose slowly, his gray eyes meeting the judge's without wavering. "Your Honor, I don't contest the fact that significant assets were accumulated during our marriage. However, I believe there may be some confusion about the current ownership of those assets." The judge's eyebrows rose slightly. "Confusion, Mr. Cole, please elaborate." And that's when Ethan Cole smiled for the first time all day. It was a smile that made Vanessa's blood run cold. A smile that suggested he had been waiting for this exact moment for a very long time. Your Honor, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the quiet courtroom, I'd like to present my complete financial disclosure for the court's review. As he handed a folder to the bailiff, Vanessa felt the world begin to shift beneath her feet. Something was terribly, terribly wrong. Tyler Grant was frowning, his legal instincts screaming that they had walked into a trap. The judge opened the folder and her expression changed from professional neutrality to something that looked almost like surprise. She looked at the papers, then at Ethan, then back at the papers. "Mr. Cole," she said slowly, "according to this disclosure, your current net worth is—" Vanessa leaned forward, her heart hammering against her ribs. This was it. This was the moment she would finally hear the exact number that would determine her future. 800 million? Maybe more. Enough to buy anything she wanted, to live anywhere she chose, to never have to worry about money again. Judge Carter looked up from the papers, her eyes finding Ethan's across the courtroom. 0. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. Vanessa's world tilted sideways, and she felt Tyler Grant's hand grip her arm as if he was afraid she might fall. "I'm sorry, Your Honor," Grant said, his voice tight with disbelief. "Did you say 0? But Ethan was already speaking, his voice calm and measured as if he were discussing the weather. "That's correct, Your Honor. As of 6 weeks ago, I legally own nothing. Every asset has been transferred to my mother's trust, of which I am merely a signatory of Vanessa's vision blurred. Her future had just evaporated in a single word. I have no property, no investments, no holdings of any kind in my name," Ethan continued, his voice never wavering. "Every transfer was properly executed, properly notarized, and properly recorded with the appropriate agencies." Vanessa felt something break inside her chest, something that had been holding her together for the past 6 months. All those nights planning her new life, all those conversations with Marcus about the places they would travel and the things they would buy, all those dreams of freedom and luxury and revenge. Gone. All of it gone. "Your Honor," Tyler Grant said, his voice coming from very far away, "this is clearly fraudulent asset transfer. We demand a full investigation." But Judge Carter was already shaking her head. "Mr. Grant, I've reviewed the documentation. Every transfer was properly executed and recorded. If Mr. Cole chose to gift his assets to his mother 6 weeks before divorce proceedings began, that is his legal right. Asset transfers between family members are perfectly legitimate when done properly. Furthermore," Judge Carter continued, "I see here that there was a prenuptial agreement signed before the marriage. Mr. Grant, were you aware of this?" Grant's face had gone pale. "Your Honor, the prenup was fairly standard, but given the circumstances of asset transfer, the prenup clearly states that in cases of marital infidelity, spousal support is waived entirely. Mrs. Cole, do you contest the validity of this agreement?" Vanessa couldn't speak. The words wouldn't come. She felt like she was drowning in air, suffocating on her own disbelief. How had this happened? How had the man she'd dismissed as predictable and boring orchestrated something so brilliant? "Your Honor," she finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper, "this can't be legal. He can't just give away everything." "Mrs. Cole," Judge Carter said, not unkindly, "your husband acted within his legal rights. The timing may seem suspicious, but the law is clear. I cannot award you assets that are no longer part of the marital estate." Ethan was watching her now.
And for the first time since she'd walked into that law office, she saw something in his eyes that made her stomach twist. Not anger, not hurt, not even satisfaction, just emptiness, like he was looking at a stranger. How? She whispered more to herself than to anyone else. "How did you know?" But Ethan didn't answer. He simply stood as Judge Carter reached for her gavel. "Given the evidence presented and the lack of marital assets to divide, I hereby grant the dissolution of marriage between Ethan Cole and Vanessa Cole. No asset division is ordered, and per the prenuptial agreement, no spousal support will be awarded. Furthermore, given the evidence of marital infidelity, Mr. Cole is awarded full relief under the terms of the prenuptial agreement. Court is adjourned." The gavel came down with a sound like thunder, and Vanessa Cole's world ended with it. She sat there staring at the empty space where her future used to be, while the man she had underestimated walked away with everything she had thought would be hers, everything except the truth that she had destroyed her own life with her greed and betrayal. 1 week after the divorce was finalized, Linda Cole sat in her son's former office, now technically her office, signing papers with the same methodical precision Ethan had inherited from her. The asset transfer documents were thick, complex, and absolutely legal. Every single thing that had belonged to Ethan Cole was about to belong to Ethan Cole again. "Are you proud of how we handled this, son?" Linda asked Ethan, looking up at him with eyes that sparkled with satisfaction. Ethan poured himself a whiskey from the bottle that was now technically his mother's whiskey. "I'm proud that justice was served, Mom. Vanessa made her choice. She chose to betray our marriage, to plan my financial destruction, to celebrate taking half of everything I'd built. I simply made sure she got exactly what she deserved." Linda signed the final document with a flourish. Nothing. Nothing. Ethan agreed as his mother handed him the papers that restored his entire fortune. Ethan's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at it and smiled. Really smiled, for the first time in months. "Dinner tonight. I found this great place downtown." Sarah Martinez was a patent attorney he'd met at a tech conference the month before. Brilliant, funny, and completely unimpressed by his wealth. She'd actually laughed when he told her he was technically broke. A man who can orchestrate something that sophisticated is never really broke, she'd said. He's just creatively liquid. Meanwhile, across town, Vanessa Cole sat in her studio apartment, the same apartment she'd rented as a backup plan when she'd first started seeing Marcus. It was supposed to be temporary, a place to stay for a few weeks while she found something worthy of her new fortune. Instead, it had become her prison. Marcus had stopped returning her calls 2 days after the divorce was finalized. Apparently, a woman with no money wasn't nearly as attractive as a woman who was about to inherit $400 million. The friends who had eagerly planned to help her spend her settlement had suddenly become busy with other things. The luxury car she'd been planning to buy remained a fantasy, and the vacation house in Tuscany existed only in her dreams. She'd taken a job at a high-end boutique in Bel Air, telling herself it was just temporary until she figured out her next move. But every day, she found herself looking at the price tags on the clothes she was selling and realizing that most of them cost more than she made in a month. One afternoon, she saw him, Ethan, walking down the street with a woman she didn't recognize, a beautiful woman with dark hair and an easy laugh, wearing a simple dress that probably cost more than Vanessa's rent. They looked happy, relaxed, like people who had never known what it felt like to lose everything in a single afternoon. As she watched them disappear into a restaurant she could no longer afford, Vanessa Cole finally understood the lesson her ex-husband had taught her. Smart men don't get even. They stay 10 steps ahead, and they make sure that when justice comes, it comes with perfect, devastating precision.